Welcome to the Life, Work, and Health podcast, where we explore all things life, health, and work because change is inevitable.
But growth, it's an option.
I'm Shayna.
I'm Navjot.
And let's grow together. So today we're talking about change because it's something that is constant. It's the most constant thing in anything in the world, and it's something that no one's immune to. Everybody will have change in their life. Sometimes change is good, sometimes change might not feel so good, and we're going to talk about all of that today.
And also everything changes, and even person's personality changes, so we cannot run from the change, so we have to embrace it in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about change, when we talk the true definition, is that something is different from before. So whatever that might look like, and we'll talk about a couple different types of change today, such as in your personal life, your professional life, and at work, as well as changes in your health and how all of those things are interconnected and how they impact you in various different ways.
And also change can be like what you expect, a trajectory of something, and it deviates from that thing. So that could be also one of the definition of change.
And like we were just saying before, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Always. And I believe it was Albert Einstein that said change is constant.
He said, I think it's insanity to do the same thing and expect for something different. Mm-hmm. So you have to change in your routine to have a different outcome.
Yeah, I knew it was something. Thanks for filling it in. So we're going to start with change in life first, because this is something that most people would be able to relate to, of a change in their life at some point. Probably within at least the last month, there's been some sort of change in someone's life. But realistically, change is a day-to-day thing, where it could be something like a change in your routine, where maybe you're waking up a little earlier that day or waking up a bit later that day. It could be that you were usually supposed to go to work at some point, but you're not. And that's what I'm facing today. Because before we started this podcast, I was saying I'm at a 0% today. And normally I work Saturday mornings, and I didn't work. And so my whole day has just been gobbledygooked now.
And also change could be as simple as waking up from the wrong side of the bed.
Yes, that is true. Absolutely. So these different types of changes can be beneficial depending what it is, but it also could be very difficult for someone. And of course, the worse, and I'm going to use quote unquote here, the change is for someone, then it's not going to feel as great for them, and it's going to be a bit more difficult. But sometimes there might be a change that isn't bad. It's just that it's a big adjustment for a person, such as quitting smoking.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's very good for the person, but for them, it might feel like it's a very bad change because of all the things that are going on in their body.
Even when we talk about changes in life, for me as an international student, I've immigrated from India, and it was a huge change for me to learn the culture of the country and learn how things are different from my home country. And I think initially it felt like it was really big burden to me, but when you transition into it, and it feels like it's best for us that we moved here, and we are learning so much things and are able to implement things in our life with the new experiences.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I've always admired about all international students, is going from a country where everything, the healthcare system, the environment, you have people close to you there, and then you shift somewhere that you don't really know anyone. If you might not know no one, right? And that would be a big adjustment already socially.
Yes.
But then changing your physical location and trying to learn the bus system, how was that for you?
It was easier, because nowadays you can use Google Maps and everything.
Yeah.
But before the technology was there, I think it would have been really difficult for the people.
Yeah.
Even I know I've heard stories about older generation, they didn't even talk to their families for maybe a year or something until they got a PCO phone.
Wow.
So there was no communication, even if they're alive or dead, Yeah, so like back in days, but now the technology has made it so easier to communicate with families, so it's much easier, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And that, I mean, even just thinking about that alone, not being able to talk to your family for a year.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't even imagine. So these are different types of change that can exist. And when we talk about other types of change, there's things like moving. It could be a change in your relationship, a change in your job, a change in your routine. It could be having a child, for example. It could be that you are doing something completely different. You're picking up a new hobby of some sort. You're exercising. And that's where the change can be difficult, because for some people, they might feel that this is a mountain that they're climbing for change.
Yeah.
Whereas others, it might be not even a hill, right? It might just be a little bump that they go over and they don't really think about it.
Yes, because I've like, as an international student, again I go back to that thing, because like for some people, when they are like pampered in India, because in India we are very really close tied to the families, so they are really pampered in India, and coming here and doing everything independently, it's a huge change, and like it affects someone's, like it affects everyone's mental health as well, and as well as it impacts your physical health after that as well.
Yeah, and that prompted a thought that I haven't thought about in a really long time, but I remember talking with a student one time and how she was struggling because everything had been done for her.
Yeah.
Where she would wake up in the morning, her clothes were picked for her, there was a coffee on her bedside table, everything was done, and then coming here,
you have to do everything.
Yeah, that's such a big shift.
Yes.
That I can only imagine how difficult that shift is.
Yes.
Because you're also dealing with so many other kinds of changes that change is also significant.
Yes.
And with change, people will experience grief. And it's very interesting anytime I talk about grief, because people immediately go to the loss of a loved one. And we actually, when we were prepping this topic, we had talked about that.
Yeah.
And how there's people that immediately will go to, oh, well, I haven't lost a loved one, so I'm clearly not experiencing any kind of grief.
I think that's one of the part of grieving, that's denial.
Yes, that's step one. You're
step one of the
absolutely right.
grieving.
You're like,
That's denial. And like for grieving, it could be as simple as like losing your phone or losing your wallet. Like you can still grieve for that, but obviously the grief will not be as similar to comparing to when someone dies. It will be a completely different grief, but you'll still have that emotion in you, and like you'll still think about that thing.
Yeah, and it's hard because a lot of times people aren't super understanding about grief, especially even I think about friends that I've had in the past that have lost a loved one, and people saying to them, well, just get over it.
Yeah.
It's been this long, just get over it. So when we think about something else like the loss of a phone or a wallet, that can be detrimental.
Yeah.
But then a lot of people around them aren't going to be as accepting to that grief as they would be to the loss of a loved one. But when you think about it, even people, when they experience the loss of a loved one, people are telling them to get over it.
Yeah.
Which just shows that there isn't that empathy or compassion, which makes people feel guilty for experiencing that grief. When we're already experiencing such a tough emotion, the last thing we need is another tough emotion to experience.
And also, like, I think everyone has a different scale of emotions, and for some people, like losing a phone would be similar to losing a family member, and for someone it could be like losing a family member would be losing like just something small. So it's like we cannot compare ourselves or anyone to each other's emotional range.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Everyone grieves differently. And some people might experience something a bit more than another person. And I think that's where sometimes people have difficulty with that empathy and compassion as well, is that they think, well, I didn't have that when this happened to me. I didn't experience that thing, so why are you experiencing that? And it's hard because each person will grieve differently. And when each person grieves differently, we can't say this is right and this is wrong, because each person is going to experience what they need to experience to get them through that moment. And when we talk about what people say, and I've used it a couple times where people say, get over it or move on, you don't actually move on.
Yeah.
You move forward. You're not able to move on because that's still going to be a part of you, whether it's a week from now, whether it's a month from now, a year from now, that's still going to be a part of you, and it's made an impact. It has a change in your body that you are going to live with for the rest of your life. Now, you might not always remember it, but it might come up in bits and pieces, or maybe it's just something that has become a part of your day-to-day that you don't even remember what it was like before that change, before that grief.
And I think like that's where the growth comes in, and like you learn to like compartmentalize things. Like you learn to like forget things, but it will still always be there. But like you need to you learn to focus on the current situation rather than like dwelling on the past.
Absolutely. And that's a bit about the change in your personal life. And now we're going to shift over to a change in your professional life. So any kind of change at work. So that could be that you have new policies. It could be a change in your employment status as well. And then
like maybe like leadership changes, like changes of management, or like you are transitioning into a newer place or something. It could be anything.
And they can be very difficult because a lot of times with work, it's very routine based.
Yeah.
When you are working somewhere, especially when you're working there for years, you're very routine based of this is what I do, this is when I do this specific thing, here's my routine, I know what to expect. So when something adjusts and that predictability is now gone, you're kind of just grasping at straws to try to understand it while also needing to meet deadlines and being able to perform a high quality work at work.
And also like I think having that change is also important, because without changing your like routines, you won't like learn new things, or you won't be able to adjust yourself to different scenarios. And like making that decision that you need a change is also important, because you don't want the like any toxic environment or anything have a mental toll on you.
Yeah.
So it's better to like step back and do the change yourself rather than like someone forcing the change on you.
Yeah, because then when you're forced to change, you're going to meet it a lot of times with resistance. And we'll talk more about why people resist change in a little bit. But I think that is a really key point, that we want to be in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
We always want to be in the driver's seat because as humans, we need that control. And I know we've talked about this a lot in our profession of TR, that we have to adapt.
Yes.
Because there is so much change that happens all the time. And we have sometimes at the drop of a hat, we have to just adjust something very quickly. And so having that adaptability is so key to be able to move forward and be able to continue to work. And so it's taking that driver's seat in that moment, like you're saying, taking that control to be able to take on that change rather than, you know, kind of just drowning in the change. And
also like with healthcare professionals, like every day could be a different thing, because we don't know what the resident or the patient's health might be that day, or how will their behavior be. So like embracing the change is really important in our field as well. So we'll now talk about change in health and how like changes in health can impact your day-to-day life or your mental health. Like for example, physical health is really important for everyone, and having that small change in your physical health can impact your mental health in a big way. Because like I think there are studies that shows that when you do exercise and you have a good physical health, you release endorphin, serotonin and dopamine that helps you to regulate your mood. And it really impacts you on day-to-day life, because I've experienced it myself as well. Because when I was not working out before, I felt depressed all the time, and when I started working out, it's like a small pleasure that you get after you work out, that you did something for yourself. And changing that routine, having that change in your routine will really impact your mental health.
Yeah, and I really started to get into running because going to the gym for me just wasn't doing what it used to do, because I had already met a lot of my goals. And so now I was like, well, what's the point of me being here? And instead of setting new goals, I was like, I'm just going to change what I'm doing, which is not always a great thing, but I also needed to change the scenery. And when I started running, I had a runner's high, which was amazing, because it was just so much exercise, and running, it makes you feel so good and positive, and it stretches for such a long period of time. and it helps you to feel positive in other aspects of your life, because if you're feeling negative and depressed and anxious and all of these different types of feelings and emotions, something like dropping something on the floor could be the end of the world.
Yeah.
But if you're feeling positive, and for example, you had the runner's high, or you got any type of support from your exercise mentally, then dropping something on the floor, you'd be like, shoot, that was terrible, and whatever you're going to say in that moment, that's clearly what I say. But that's something to keep in mind as well, is that you are setting yourself up for success or failure based on the things that you're doing physically to help yourself.
Like, I remember a joke about this, and they say, like, if you are very worried about your mental health, go for a run and you'll know that your physical health is much worse than your mental health.
So when we're thinking about physical health and mental health and the interconnectedness of both of them, it's important we think about very key biological factors that are going to impact your physical health, like sleep and eating. Both of these are so key for having a good mental health. And we'll start with talking about sleep patterns first. If you've ever had a bad sleep in your entire life, which I think everybody has had at some point in time, you wake up and you feel terrible. And you're already operating at such a low percentage. And I know we talked about this in our last podcast with the phone.
Yeah.
And it's true that when you wake up and you haven't slept well, you're already starting on a bad foot. And then when you're continuing to progress through your day, you're getting more and more tired because you're still doing the same things you were doing before. You just started it a lot more tired. But when you have a good sleep, I have very bad sleeps, and when I have a good sleep, I'm like, this is what normal people feel like.
Yeah.
It's nice. And with eating habits, have you ever felt hangry before?
Every time, every morning I would say
Every
that.
morning. I love it. And it's true. When you're feeling hangry, you're so angry because you're hungry, and then as soon as you eat something, it all just kind of goes away. And it shows that physical health and that mental health and that interconnectedness.
Like, even when we talk about the sleep patterns, like, not just the quality of sleep, I think the posture you sleep, because I have a background of physiotherapy, so like I always talk about how the posture affects you, even like the pillow position affects your like physical health, and it always impact. If you have pain in the morning first thing, and your day will be bad. It's just like if you have an injured foot, you'll try to not put weight on that foot, so it's like you will try to avoid things that might have that bad impact on your health.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And it's always important to know that information to be able to best support yourself, to be able to embrace any kind of change that comes in that day. Yeah. Because we always meet change with negativity, whether we've had a good sleep, had some food, or not. Because a lot of times with change, we have a very difficult time coping, and we'll talk about coping a bit later. But then when you are having a good sleep, you're eating right, you're taking care of your body, you're knowing all of these different things that you need to do for your physical health, it's just going to put you that step forward. Because changes in your health are going to make you vulnerable. And a good representation of that is anyone that's experienced a health condition. And a lot of the clients we work with or have worked with in the past are experiencing very complex conditions, because usually when they come to our care, they're having very complex needs at that point. And it's such a vulnerable state because we don't fully understand what's going on with our body physically. It's now impacting our mental health because if we're experiencing pain or we're not sleeping well or there's some sort of adjustment. It's making us feel so much more vulnerable. And when you feel vulnerable, you want to isolate yourself to be away from social settings. And that's why they say a lot of heart attacks, they happen in bathrooms because people are experiencing something, they're feeling a bit of embarrassment, vulnerability, and so they want to go somewhere that they're alone, but that's also the worst place to be.
Yes. And also like most of the mental health condition, it'll impact your, like, it'll have like impact on your physical health and vice versa, as you were talking. And like it's really important to identify those triggers or identify that, like, the issues that are coming and like go to a professional when it's needed.
And that's always such a key. Waiting to go to a professional is sometimes the longest part that people are taking so long, and then it's just getting worse and worse. And the worse it gets, the more you have to backtrack at that point. And I will be the first to say I am very infamous for that, of just delaying things, and I'm trying to get better about it because I've recognized the impact of when you do get that help, when you seek out that professional support, how significantly it adjusts my mental health.
Yes.
So when we talk about life and changes and everything that happens in our day-to-day, I like to always compare it to a hypothetical backpack, where you're thinking about you're just wearing a backpack, and every single time something happens, it's going into your backpack. So sometimes it could be something that's a feather and you're putting it in there. Sometimes it could be as heavy as a textbook. It just depends on the situation. It depends on what you're experiencing, and you're going to carry that all with you. Like we were talking about earlier, you will always have things that you're moving forward with, not moving on or getting over. And that's such a key thing to remember with that hypothetical backpack, that you're carrying so much with you, and the more that's in there, the heavier it is, and the more difficult it is to navigate through things, right? Imagine you put a really heavy backpack on you. You might just fall over depending on the weight balance.
Yeah, and also like when you talk about a feather, like I just have an example, like when you try to like hold something, like even like some small thing like a feather, like above your head, or maybe just like above your shoulder level, like you won't feel it maybe for 10 minutes, maybe for 20 minutes, but like after half an hour, your shoulder, your arm will get so sore because you are trying to put that effort just to hold something so small. And like it is similar to like when you try to hold some emotions, and like it impacts you so badly, but you won't realize it until you start having that shoulder pain. And like identifying that you need help and like accepting that you need help is really big step towards change.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of people do resist change. A lot of people do resist a lot of things in relation to taking care of themselves as well. And I think always a very key thing to think about with change is that history is going to continue to repeat itself unless you learn and grow. Because if you learn and grow, you're less likely to have that history repeat itself, because you're learning from those mistakes, you're growing from those mistakes, and you're making sure that it's not happening again. But if you're not learning and growing, it's just going to keep happening over and over and over. And it's going to make it very difficult to adapt to that change and move forward with that change.
And I think like my history teacher always said, like I always ask the question like why we are learning about history, and she always said like you are just learning history not because you have to learn the dates. You have to learn from what they did wrong in back days and what we should not do it in now coming days, or what the newer generation should not do, what the elders did wrong.
Earlier we were talking about how people resist change, and most people resist change a lot because it's very difficult. It means that there's something new, things like that. And we're going to talk a bit about the different reasons why somebody might resist change. And we've compiled a few of the different reasons that are a bit more common, but there are many different reasons why people resist change. But we're going to just touch on a few of them here, and we'll explain a little bit more so you can think about maybe if there is a change in your life that you need to make or that is going on right now, and if you're resisting it, it might be one of these different underlying reasons. So the first is the fear of the unknown. So this is always something that people are scared of because we like familiar things. We like to have that predictability. And when you can't predict something, when something's not familiar and you have no idea what could be the result of it, that's such a scary feeling.
And also, but like when you don't have an idea what's going to happen, like you can achieve something really big, or you could fail at something, but like you still have to try something and in order to see how it'll lead you to, or what it'll lead you to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a good idea to resist that change just solely from that fear of the unknown, because you're right, there's so many different things And a lot of times people will focus on, well, these are the bad things that could happen, but there is also all of these good things that could happen from it as well.
Yeah, just for example, like quitting a job, like one might think, oh, I won't be able to financially recover from that part, but like there's always another ways, and like people learn new ways, and it'll like give them more experience that how things are done, and like it helps them to navigate through tough times and like have that experience to tell to others or teach their younger kids when they grow up, so that they know how to deal with things. And I think that's why facing change is really important.
Absolutely. And when we talk about all the bad things that could happen, that brings us into our next point of fear of failure.
Yes.
Right? Where it could be, this change is happening and here's the 5 things that could go wrong in this situation. And we're so focused on those bad things that could happen that might make this change not a good idea, that we don't even try. We're just thinking the likelihood of me failing is so high that I'm not even going to try. And we're completely ignoring the potential success that could come from that. And people are so worried about that failure of, well, what if I don't succeed?
Yes, and also like fear of failure could come due to like lack of self-confidence. Like people don't have that confidence in them that they will make it work, and it can like impact how like it'll impact like the mental health at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, another reason when we're resisting change, it's not a great reason, because there can be so much success from it, and we might actually be limiting ourselves from that success. As Wayne Gretzky had said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
Right? Where, yeah, maybe you do shoot, if we use 100 again, you shoot on the net 100 times, you might miss 80% of them, but there's still that 20% that you're still succeeding.
Yeah.
The next one is loss of control. We as humans love control. Yes. We love to have control, and a lot of people have a very difficult time letting go of that control and letting someone else kind of take leads on things. And we've seen that in different leadership roles and very infamous ones, right? Where you see a lot of different infamous leaders. We talked about it in our leadership course, that people don't like not having that control, and the idea of not having that control outweighs the change and the success that could come from it.
And like there was a Marvel movie, I don't know if you have seen, from Doctor Strange. There's a dialogue when the Ancient One teaches Doctor Strange, and she tells him that you cannot force a river to submit. You have to like give your control to the river and flow with the river to control your movements. And then he says like, what does that mean? Like, I have to lose control to be in control. And that's a really important thing, that you have to lose your control like to the flow of life, so that you can be in control of what things you can do. And that's really important to understand in the change as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we think we have more control over things than we do, when realistically the amount of control that we have over things is very small. The things that we control are very, very small. The things outside of our control, there is endless things. And that can be a bit of a struggle, because there's so few things that we can control. If there's a change coming about us losing a bit of control, we're so scared to give that up, because there's already so many things we can't control. But it's recognizing that sometimes you do need to lose that control for you to regain that control. Absolutely.
And it'll help you navigate through more, because you can only control your reaction to things. You cannot control what happens surrounding you.
Yes, definitely. The next one is being a creature of habit. We love our habits. We love our rituals that we have as humans, and we prefer that routine. We prefer to have that predictability, like we were talking about earlier with work. We like that routine. We like that predictability. So then when there's any type of unpredictability that's coming in, it's disrupting us, it's going to make us very reluctant and uncomfortable. So then we want to stay with things that are already stable, even if they aren't the best thing for us anymore.
And I think this is also one of the root cause for superstitions. Like when someone says like, oh, this might have happened because I woke up from the wrong side of the bed, and like even I do that sometimes when I see when something bad happens to me. I say like, oh, I remember now, I didn't do this before I went out of the bed, because I do it every day, and I broke the pattern, and this has happened because of that. And like, this is I think the root of superstitions as well. I'm not saying all the superstitions are wrong, but like some of the superstitions, like it can be root from this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we have that routine and we do those things every day, it just gives us that comfort of, I know that this is something that's already happened, and that creates that similarity or familiarity, not similarity, familiarity of it, that this is my routine. This is what I do. This is how my day goes. So anything that kind of throws a wrench in that is now just creating a lot of difficulty for a person mentally, which then relates to physically as well.
Yeah.
And then the next one we're talking about here is the past negative experiences. So if somebody's had a change before and they've had a negative experience from it, they might be very hesitant to deal with that type of change again, whether it's similar change or if it's a completely different change. People might think, well, I had this change before and it didn't go well. I failed, or I was rejected, or, you know, my life fell into pieces, whatever they're going to say that had happened in that moment. They're now going to think, well, I don't want to do that again because clearly it didn't work the first time.
And it's also like it connects to the fear of failure again with this thing that, like, if you already had failed at something, for example, if you failed at a test or something and you studied in a particular way, then you might think like, oh, maybe I did something wrong, or maybe I didn't do enough preparation for it, instead of thinking like what I could do better to clear that exam. Like we focus on the negative part rather than focusing on how we can move forward with it.
Yeah, and patience is such a key thing within that sometimes we just have to wait, and it's like putting a tea bag in a water.
Yeah.
That if you take it out immediately, it's not ready, and it's going to just taste like a little bit of water with a little bit of flavor. And
you don't have to, you can also leave it too long in that, so it'll be spoiled.
Yes,
so you have to find that perfect sweet spot to take it out.
Yes, definitely. And our last one here is the perceived effort versus the reward, where sometimes change will seem so big that there's so much effort that needs to be put in that it's, you know, is this really worth it for me? Is this reward really worth it? And I think I have this conversation a lot with people that are smokers, because with something like quitting any kind of addiction, not just smoking, but quitting any kind of addiction, it's, well, there's so much effort that I have to put into it, and there's going to be so many emotions, so many challenges, and it's this big situation that then I'm not going to be smoking anymore, but is the reward really worth it? Which, yes, when you think about it from a physical health perspective and longevity of life, but in that moment, all they're seeing is all these obstacles that exist that, oh, then me not smoking, which is something that most of the time people typically enjoy for themselves in that moment, because when they don't enjoy it, they're more likely to then transition over to quitting, but they're still enjoying it in that moment, that they're thinking, this isn't really worth it for me.
And I think the reward that they get during that addiction is much bigger than the reward they think they will get after getting rid of the addiction. So that's why they keep on going in one particular pattern rather than breaking the pattern and going back to something healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big part of resisting change is that people are just comfortable on the path that they're on, and they're thinking, well, I've been doing this for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, and does it really matter? And, you know, it's going to be so hard, and I don't even think I can do it, whatever it is. But it's so important to remember that you don't have to stay on the path that you're walking on.
Yeah.
You can change directions at any time. And it's that if something isn't working for you, or you're met with a roadblock, or this path is no longer serving you, you can change directions. You don't have to stay where you were going just because you were on that path, and you were on that path for 5 years or 10 years. It doesn't mean that you can't now either create a new path or find a different path. So we've talked a lot today about change, and now we're going to talk more about coping with change, because as we started, change is inevitable. And now we need to figure out, well, what can I do when I'm faced with change, or that I want to make a change of some sort? So the first thing we're going to talk about is emotion-based coping versus problem-based coping, because you need to know which coping you need to use. Because if you need problem-based coping and you're using emotion-based coping, you're not going to receive what you need from it, and vice versa. So you always have to first identify what exactly is going on, what's the situation, what am I coping with, and then progress into your strategies. So when we talk about emotion-based coping, that's when you can't change the situation. So for example, the loss of a loved one. You are not able to bring that person back. Although we want to feel that and be able to do that, it's not possible. So then in those moments, you need to take care of your emotion because you cannot change the situation. So that's taking care of yourself, performing self-care of some sort. So this could be things like journaling, meditation, something that works for you specifically, because it's going to be different for every person. So you're very much focused on taking care of your emotions and being kind to yourself in that moment. With problem-based coping, that's when you can change the problem. So for example, if you are facing issues at work or at home, then something that you can do is then adjust the situation how you need. So maybe it's that you need to set a boundary with someone. I'm not really comfortable with this specific thing, whatever the situation may be, but you have the ability to change the situation. And the only way to really deal with that situation and cope with it is solving that problem. Because then if you're just going to take care of your emotions in that moment, that problem still exists, and it's still going to cause you a lot of stress and anxiety, and it's going to make you very resistant to that change.
And for problem-based coping, I would just like to add, like, if you can pen down the problem, you are like already solved the problem by 50%. And like once you pen down what's the main root cause of the problem is, then you can like see different methods that you can cope with it. It could be like small things like having boundaries, or like setting up distance, or stepping back. And like it's really important to understand what the core of the problem is before you start coping up with that.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to identify what is going on first, because if you're just aimlessly, you're kind of taking a shot in the dark, you might get lucky. But most of the time, you're going to be focused on something that is not the problem at all, and it's not going to help you in any kind of way.
And also with problem-based coping, like you have to understand like what the root of the cause is. Is it you, or is it the next person? And if it is the next person, then you only can like try to keep that boundaries. And if it is something to do with you, then you can work on yourself to create that environment for someone else, so that they don't have any problem with you.
Yeah, because
like both ways, not just...
Yeah, exactly, because you're right. You can't change someone else. The only person that you can change in the entire world is you. And whether it's how you're reacting, or the boundaries that you're setting, or the environment that you're creating, you're absolutely right. You are the one that you can change, and that's what you need to focus on. Definitely.
It's like you can be either a thermometer or a thermostat. Thermometer is like you react to things, but thermostat is you create that environment for everyone else. So you can be either one.
That is a very good point. I've never heard that before. That's a very good one. So we're talking about embracing change in a positive manner, which is very key. Because if you go into anything in life with negativity, mostly you're going to be met with negativity. If you go in with positivity, you're more likely to be met with positivity. Now, it doesn't mean always. There is times you're going to go into something with positivity and you're going to be met with that negativity, but you're more likely to receive that positive outcome if you're going in with that positive mindset, because you're already starting to set the environment like we just talked about.
And I think with perception, I always bring up 2 points. The first point is like the half glass full theory. It's like people perceive that there can only be 2 solutions to it, like either the glass is half full or it's half empty. But why don't we see it like that? For someone who just need to drink water, the half glass is okay. But someone he wants to make something into it, like a juice to it, it's half glass, it's still okay. Or someone who just need the glass emptied, it's still okay. So there's not always like just 2 possibilities. It could be multiple possibilities. It's just how we say things. And the second thing I would like to add is like your thoughts become your reality. When you focus on, as you said, like when you focus on negative, you'll see everything negative around you, and you'll like discard the positive things. So like your thoughts will become your reality in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we had talked about this a bit earlier about manifesting
Yeah.
and trying to have that positive mindset for whatever we're doing so that we're able to receive a more positive outcome. And that's something that'll be really helpful when we're thinking about change and trying to cope with that change, because it helps you to build a bit of that resilience as well. Because when we're feeling that positivity, then we're more resilient. If we bring it back to the example we talked about earlier about when you didn't sleep well or you didn't eat well and you drop something on the ground, it might seem like the end of the world.
Yeah.
But when you are going in with that positive mindset, you're setting yourself up for that success. It's building that resiliency of, I can do this, I am capable of this, and I can cope with this situation.
Yes. And like I would like to add, like when we talk about change, like people often go back to their past selves to see like what things they failed at or what things made them to fail at something. And like I think dwelling at past has never done good to anyone. And like also the future has like you never know what future hold. Like you can try your best at something, and like something external factor can collapse all the plan. So you cannot be certain about the future as well. It's like you have to live in the present, and like you have to embrace every moment of the present. I think that's the word called carpe diem. Like living in the present.
Seize the day,
Seize the day.
Yeah.
Because they say like you only live once, but it's better to say like you die only once. You can live every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so much we can learn from the past, but you're right, we shouldn't stay there.
Yeah.
And there is so much that we can do for our future. We can set goals, we can try to figure out what we need to be able to get where we need to go, but then we shouldn't also just be so focused on that, because there's so many things that we could miss in the present.
Yes.
And when we're so focused on one thing, we're going to miss so many other things around us, and that is going to impact our learning and our growth, because we're so focused on just one thing that we're missing all of the other lessons and information around us.
And also, like, I just want to add, like, when you're talking about the future, we should not think that every time as the future is uncertain, like we will fail every time. We have to prepare that we'll be winning, but like if something bad happens, then like you'll find a way. Like you have to prepare your mindset like that you'll find a way if something bad happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if we think about finding a way, being here right now, we have found a way, right?
Yeah.
We have always found a way.
Yeah.
If you are here now watching or listening or however you're engaging with our content, you are here and you've made it to this point. You have found your way to this point. So if you've been able to do it until this point, you can continue to do it. You are more than capable.
And that's where the thoughts becomes your reality comes.
Yes, definitely. And the next thing we're going to talk about is the window of tolerance and the change with it. So I always like to say, imagine a window, right? So we have a window behind us, which is very helpful. But if you imagine a window, there is going to be so much that you can handle that is going to have either in the window, within your window, it could be above your window, it could be below your window. So when you're within your window, you are going to have very clear head, you're going to be resilient, you're going to feel positive, you're going to be able to cope with change, and you'll be in the present like we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Then when you're above your window, this means that you are overwhelmed, you're anxious, and you're not able to think clearly, and the likelihood of you coping with change is going to be very difficult. And a lot of times when we're above our window, we're very much focused on the future. And when you're below the window, you're going to just shut down, whether a little bit or completely. You're going to be disconnected, you're going to disassociate, and realistically, you're just going to be on autopilot. And typically when you're below, that means that you're focusing a lot on the past, which all of these things are going to impact you being able to be in the present. The biggest thing that you have to remember about your window of tolerance is that if there is a shift and you notice that you're above or below and you're starting to exhibit these symptoms of being above or below, that you need to take care of yourself so that it brings you back into your window. Because if you just keep going, you're just going to get further away from your window of tolerance, and it's just going to be very difficult to cope. So you have to stay mindful, like you were talking about earlier, being in that present moment is such a key thing to be in your window of tolerance.
And also, like when we talked in our last video about an inner critic, like we do have control on that inner critic. It's just like we have to identify that control, and when the inner critic is taking us to the past or he's taking us to the future, we have to put a full stop to the thought of inner critic, and you have to like increase the positive affirmations from yourself that you don't have to dwell in the past or you don't have to be worried about the future, because you cannot control those anymore. Like you cannot control what you did in past, and you cannot control what you will be doing in the future, because you don't know, like you don't have that information to think what you will be able to do. Like I've made mistakes in my past, and now when I see at past, like I, rather than like thinking that I might have done things differently, I just learned that I did this wrong, and next time when some similar situation appears, I don't have to do that, and I don't have to do the same things that I did last time.
Yeah, and I think that's such a key thing, because not everyone can learn from their mistakes, but you can learn how to learn from your mistakes. Which can sound a bit confusing, but realistically it's that you have the capability, and it's like what we were talking about earlier about going on that path, that you can learn from your mistakes. Even if you've been on a path and you haven't learned from them in the past, that doesn't mean that you can't learn from them moving forward. It's being present in that moment. And bringing it back to the inner critic, because I thought about this as well when you were talking about it, is that you don't have to validate every thought that's in your mind, right? And that's what it made me think of, is you don't. You're going to have so many thoughts that fly through your brain all day, every day. And you don't have to give your inner critic the microphone. You can be like, no, and take it away from them, right? Because in that moment, you have that control. And that is such a key thing, that you always remind yourself, I am in control. Because when you remind yourself of that, you're more likely to be in control.
But like, again, I would like to add the same thing. You have to lose control to be in control sometimes.
Exactly.
But not to your inner critic.
Yes, exactly. So it's finding that balance in there. And the only way to find that balance is through trial and error. And sometimes people will get very discouraged by that error, because you're trying something and thinking, does this work? And if it does work, great, you know what to do. But if it doesn't work, people are so discouraged and they think, well, I failed, I'm not going to do it again, which brings us back to the resistance of change. So it's recognizing that sometimes you're going to try something and it's not going to work, but that doesn't mean that the next thing you try isn't going to work, and you have to keep trying until you find the thing that works for you.
Yes.
The last thought that we kind of want to leave you with here as we are starting to conclude our podcast is that you don't need to be so attached to who you currently are that you aren't giving the future version of yourself a chance. If you are so focused on the past, or you are so focused on resisting that change, you aren't giving your future self that chance that they deserve. And you and your future self are worthy of that chance. You deserve that chance, but you are the one that can give yourself that chance.
And like, don't do anything or not do anything like that your future self will regret and look back and say like, I shouldn't have done that.
Definitely.
And don't be afraid of doing something wrong and learning from it. Both ways.
Both ways, exactly. Well, we hope that you've enjoyed our podcast today. We hope that you've learned something, and thanks for going with us.
See you next time.